Oh, hi everyone. You've just caught Mrs. Heavey playing with the trains on this amazing track that George and Winnie have made. But did you know that trains were invented nearly 200 years ago? Well, we're going to learn all about trains and the person who invented them today. Now, the person who invented the first steam engine was also known as the father of the railways, and he was called George Stephenson. And if you're in Stephenson House at school, then you're in the house that's named after George Stephenson, because he was such an important inventor and he changed the lives of so many people, all of us in fact, because before trains, people would have to use horse and carriage. There weren't any cars or planes. So when the trains were introduced and they were invented, it really changed how far people could travel and how quickly they could do it. So George Stephenson was a very important person, and we're going to learn all about him. He was born in 1781 and he was an engineer, means he liked to build things. He built steam locomotives for the railways, and because of this, people called him the father of the railways. He was born on the 9th of June in 1781. That's a long time ago, over 200 years ago. And he was born in the north of England, in a place called Newcastle. At this time, Britain was starting to change from a land of farms and small villages to a land of factories and big cities. We call this change the Industrial Revolution. And near where he lived, there were lots of coal mines, and his father worked in a coal mine, and he looked after the steam engines that helped them to get the coal from underground up to the surface, because at that time people didn't have central heating and they didn't have gas fires or gas to cook their food on or electricity to cook their food on. They relied on coal, and they relied on that to heat their homes with fires in their homes. And these steam engines were also used to pump water out of the mine. The Stephensons as a family weren't very rich, and George lived in a small cottage. He was so interested in machines because he helped his dad and he saw what his dad was doing. And this is how he found out about steam engines. George didn't go to school. Not everybody did in those times. From the age of 14, he worked at a coal mine and often took the machines to pieces to see how they worked. He wanted to learn how to read and write, so he went to school 3 nights a week after work, and this was only when he was 14. Times were very, very different. In 1802, George Stephenson married a servant called Frances Henderson, and they had a son called Robert in 1803. In 1825, George continued to be interested in the steam engines. Steam-powered road engines were slow and couldn't go up hills, so some cars had started to be introduced, and next week we'll look at the invention of cars, and we'll have a week all about cars. Now George worked out that steam engines needed to run on rails, just like the railway tracks we have today, and if they did that, they work even better. In 1814, George made his first railway locomotive. Now that's a different word for engine. In 1825, a new railway was opened between Stockton and Darlington. George and his men built the track and the locomotive. It was the first steam train to carry passengers in the world. So it was a very important invention. All of a sudden, people could get onto this train and travel wherever they wanted to go, as long as it was on the track, but they could travel without the use of horses and carts. The only trouble was that it was rather slow as we would know it. It only travelled at 15 miles an hour, which is pretty slow for us, but for them it felt really fast. And that engine was called Locomotion Number 1, and it could carry 450 passengers. In 1829, another railway was planned to run between Liverpool and Manchester. George competed with 2 other engineers to find the best locomotive to run on the railway. With his son Robert, he built the Rocket. It moved faster than the others, and it did not break down, which is very important. Everyone agreed the Rocket had won. In 1830, the Rocket could pull people along the railway at 36 miles an hour. No one had ever travelled so fast before. Imagine if you were only used to walking or going on a horse and carriage, and then all of a sudden you were in this engine that could make you travel really fast. In 1838, George's son Robert built the first railway station between London and Birmingham. It was finished in 1838. So these men followed in their father's footsteps, and they were inspired by their dads, weren't they? George, because of his father working in the coal mine and he was around the machines, and then Robert because of George's work inventing the steam engine. Sadly, George Stephenson died in 1848, but I think we can all agree that his invention really changed the way our country worked. But what difference did trains make? Steam trains firstly carried goods such as coal, but then people began using trains to travel between places, like we heard about the 450 passengers. Remember, people never had travelled at such speeds before. Now think about these questions. How do you think trains changed people's lives? And what differences are there between these types of transport? Have a look. You can see in the pictures there's an old cart with a horse, and then compare it to the steam engines. Now, when the world opens up again, there's a really fantastic trip that you can do to Buckinghamshire Railway Centre in Quainton, near Aylesbury. And I've been there, and you can go on the steam engines and feel what it would have felt like to go on those very first steam engines. It's a great trip. Which of these people's thoughts are for or against the development of the railways across the country? Because some people would have been really excited about the invention of trains, but other people might have been a little bit scared or nervous of the changes that it would bring. So let's listen. The trains will carry my farming goods to the market much more quickly, so I can sell more. So that was probably a farmer talking there, and he's thinking, well, I won't have to put all of my carrots and potatoes and everything else that he's growing on a carriage with a horse and cart and go all the way to the market himself. He could put it on the steam engine and get it there much more quickly. He could put more on and sell more and make more money. What about the next one? The trains will bring all the riffraff into London and cause all sorts of problems. Oh my goodness, we don't want riffraff in London. You probably don't even know what riffraff means. But it means that somebody who was ever so posh living in London didn't want all of the commoners that lived out in the country to come to London and spoil their city. Goodness me. What about the next one? The railway will cut right through my land. Now, this is an interesting point because this still applies today. I don't know whether you drive between Great Missenden and Aylesbury and onwards, but a lot of people don't like the fact that the HS2 is being built. I'm sure if you talk to your grown-ups at home, they might have something to say about the high speed railway being built in Buckinghamshire. And some people will be thinking, well, that spoils my view from my house. And some people have even had to sell their houses so that the new railway can be built. Some people are for the high-speed railway because it means they can get up north in the country much quicker. But other people are thinking, well, wildlife are going to lose their homes, it's going to spoil my view, there's going to be more traffic, and they are against the high-speed railway being built. So it still applies today. Even now we're facing the same problems of change. Change always brings problems, but change can be a very good thing as well. Let's look at the last one. The trains mean that I can visit my family much more easily and quickly than I could before. And that was a fantastic thing. If you were having to get in your horse and cart to go and see your family who live far away, it would take a very long time. And if the weather was bad, it would make for a difficult journey. Whereas they could get on the steam train and be there much, much quicker. So there's always pros and cons, good things that can come from change and bad things that can come from change. But you have to look at both sides, really. So where you see the green ticks appearing, that was the the good thing that would happen because of the railways expanding and getting bigger. And the red crosses were the people who were saying, this is not a good thing. It will cut through my land. It will bring all sorts of people to London that we don't want here. And they were negative about the change it would bring. But I think in year one, we're really good at being positive, aren't we? And seeing the good side of things in life. I hope you feel like you've learnt a lot about George Stephenson and his amazing inventions. But if you need a recap, you can open up the slides yourself and go through them with a grown-up, or you could go onto the internet. You could go to Kiddle, which is a great website to help you research different things and see if you can find out some more facts about George Stephenson, because we want you to have a go at doing a little bit of writing about him. You can use this template if you would like, this writing frame here, which you can print out, or you could make your own fact sheet about him if you like. I'm going to use this one just because it's a little bit easier. And we're going to start off by finding out his date of birth. Then we can find the date of when he died, his date of death. Then finish this sentence. George Stephenson is significant because... Now, what does significant mean? That means, why was he important? What did he do to change things? So you can think about what was the most important thing he did. And also you can record some interesting facts. Give me an interesting fact about George Stephenson. If you can find one that I haven't found, then that would be brilliant. Good luck, and I look forward to seeing how you get on.